Right. We'll call the special meeting of council April 28th to order at 5:30 p.m. And are there any amendments to the agenda?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, I have none.
Thank you. So need a motion to confirm that the agenda for the special council meeting of April 28th, 2021 be approved as presented. Moved by Councillor Fenlon, seconded by Councillor Lego. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest.
Okay, let me try that.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, I have none.
But Brian can't, he's not saying that I'm in the meeting.
You are, John. Councillor Bath, we can hear you.
Oh, Mayor says he can hear me now.
Thank you. You can hear us. We can hear you. Very good. So we'll get right down to staff reports. Item 4.1, Mayfair demolition. The council directs staff to accept the Renew Construction Incorporated quote to complete the removal of the unanticipated additional asbestos containing materials in the former Mayfair Theatre at an additional cost of $174,600 plus HST. Need a mover to put that on the table. Moved by Councillor Fenlon, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. And do we want to have a staff presentation or go straight to council discussion? Clerk, CAO.
Through you, Worship, I thought Jody was going to be on the call at the meeting tonight, but he's not. I can speak to it very briefly. It was discovered in some vermiculite in the building, and it was tested positive for asbestos. So it has to be abated properly. And this is the quote that we received, $174,600 in order to do that.
Discussion, council. Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could refresh my memory. It seemed to me a few years ago we put $300,000 aside for this, but I see we're taking it out of long-term debt. Can somebody clarify that?
CAO.
Thank you, Worship. At this time, I'm not able to verify that information. I'd have to follow up and get back to council.
My memory is we considered that the cost might be $300,000 to do the demolition as an approximate number. I don't think that we ever said let's put money aside for it. It was just my memory is that we had an awareness of that as a cost. I may be wrong, but that's my memory, Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that we did put it aside several budgets, maybe 2017 or so, and that it was put into a reserve. But
all right, the clerk's memory is usually quite good.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yeah. So it wasn't put into a reserve. It was budgeted for in that particular budget year because it was anticipated that the demolition was going to occur at that time, but the demolition didn't occur. So then the money ended up becoming part of the surplus for that particular year, or was offset on other municipal projects. So it wasn't put into a reserve.
okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Thanks, Councillor Timpson. Your memory is good and mine's half good. So that's any further discussion, council? Then I'll put it to, if there's no further discussion, I'll put it to a vote. We have the motion on the table. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Are there any opposed? Sorry, just no. Thank you. Carried. Item 4.2, Ontario Trillium Grant Funding Agreement. The council authorize and direct the Chief Administrative Officer to execute a transfer payment agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Sioux and the Ontario Trillium Foundation for COVID-19 recovery for the Sioux Public Library, RF 113708, and further that council authorizes the passing of bylaw number 42-21, being a bylaw to authorize and direct the CIO to execute a transfer payment agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Sioux and the Ontario Trillium Foundation for COVID-19 recovery for the Sioux Public Library. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Timpson. discussion at CAO. I'll start with you with staff. Anything from staff?
Thank you, Worship. Just very briefly, the report is fairly self-explanatory. The Sioux Public Library applied for funding for the library projects through our portal on the Ontario Trillium Grant Funding Agreement site. And because of that, it has to be passed by the municipality because it's under our portal. So we were asked to, the TPA agreement was sent to the municipality to sign off on. So we will be receiving the funds and then transferring them to the library for their projects on their behalf.
Thank you. Discussion, council. See no hands up. Any last call for discussion on this item before I call the vote? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 4.3, temporary borrowing request, the Friends of Cedar Bay. And that's all I have on my print agenda. Is there a motion on the digital agenda?
No, through you, Mayor Lawrence, the intent was to have council discuss the request, and depending on council's direction, I will draft a motion based on the direction.
All right, so everybody's read the report, on this basically acting as, how would you put it, a temporary bank for the Friends of Cedar Bay while the time it takes to get the funding into the Friends of Cedar Bay for the projects. Discussion, council. Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, I'll just speak for Bobby Roberts, the chair. We're asking for this just in the event that the bank does not approve the line of credit they're taking. We were fairly confident when we entered into this that they would, but with COVID and everything, they've become much more strict, I guess. And so it's basically in the event that they don't. If they do approve the line of credit, we'll just go with the line of credit. But if they don't, then it would be just another, another route for us to take. We've got 2 contractors lined up. One of them has already put out a significant amount for the electrical. And if we could even just cover the costs that the contractors have put out already, that would be helpful. But again, we should know this week, but this is just something we could fall back on if necessary.
Thank you. Council discussion. I saw another hand go. Councillor Lego.
Yeah, if we do go forward with this, would they have to sign a contract just in case something happens that this funding doesn't come through at all? Or has it been approved and it's coming and they're just waiting and they need some, I don't know who can answer that.
CAO, do you want to do?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, one of the things I did is when they got so they got confirmation through emails indicating that it was approved and they could start expending money. With all projects, even municipal projects, they always say that there's a risk that the funding will not be approved until the TPA is signed, but they're taking their because of COVID, I guess, and other issues, they're taking their time getting the transfer payment agreement to the Friends of Cedar Bay. So I'm fairly confident because it's a small amount of money. It's not huge, it's not large, that it won't be an issue because we've done that before with the municipality on some of our projects where we've started to expend money before we got the TPA and there's been no issues.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Anything further, Councillor Timpson?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, the 57,000 is confirmed from both the province and the federal government. It's just a matter of waiting. And under these grants, the recipient you have to pay for the project and then you recover it from the funder. So that was why we were going for the line of credit, because that's a requirement. That's the requirement of these grants.
Thank you. Anything further, council? So there is no motion on the table right now, clerk. Do you have one ready for us? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mayor Lawrence. I've drafted the following for council's consideration. That council authorizes and directs staff to temporarily loan funds to the Friends of Cedar Bay, if required, until their grant funding is received, at which time the Friends of Cedar Bay will repay the loaned funds to the municipality.
Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Fenelon. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 5, delegations. 5.1, the Sioux Lookout Airport Master Plan presentation. Presenter Greg Valentine, Senior Project Manager, Transportation Systems, Aviation Canada, and Airport Manager Henschrock. I'll let you take over and do the introductions. Set it up. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mayor Lawrence. Thank you very much. Well, here's Greg.
Here's Greg. Here I am. Through the wonders of Zoom these days, right? Well, thank you, Your Worship. So what I'd like to do this evening is just go through a PowerPoint that sort of is an overview of the airport master plan that we've recently just completed. Interesting project. It was started pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and you know, as you're well aware, the aviation industry has been devastated by the effects of COVID, and actually Sioux Lookout Airport is one of the fortunate ones because of the nature of the traffic that goes through the airport. Although it's been hit fairly significantly financially in terms of level of traffic, it is probably doing much better than a lot of other comparable regional airports throughout Canada. So I'll just, if I can just share my screen and let me know if everybody can see my screen.
It's up, Greg. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So a little bit of background, and all of you are also well aware of a lot of the points of background that were included in the master plan, but Sioux Lookout certainly is a hub of aviation activity, considered the hub of the North, providing services to 29 remote First Nation communities, which are largely dependent on air service for access to medical treatment, social services, educational institutions, and just access to the south. The catchment area, including Sioux Lookout, has a population of approximately 40,000 people. Interesting to note that Sioux Lookout's economy has transitioned over the years from what was a resource-based economy to now a knowledge-based economy, with the largest employers being the healthcare center and the Sioux Lookout First Nation Health Authority. And just a map there, just kind of giving the extent of the catchment area that is served by Sioux Lookout and the services and by the airport itself. So what are the objectives of an airport master plan? So the prime objective of a master plan is to establish a vision for the airport. And this is typically a 20-year vision and often beyond. It develops a rational development for the concept of the airport over the long term and identifies you know, some of the operational long-term business objectives while accommodating those short-term improvements. The airport master plan assists the airport management in making informed and strategic decisions about infrastructure improvements and other matters related to the development of the airport over time. Through the master plan process, we often identify potential deficiencies, which again are addressed as part of this vision going forward. Another benefit of the airport master plan, it informs both airport stakeholders and tenants and the community as to the vision of the airport so that they can share in that vision and support it through their own infrastructure improvements and operational improvements. The master plan identifies improvements to support forecasted demand that's identified in the master plan in a safe, efficient, and cost-effective manner. It's important to note that the airport master plan is not a regulatory document. It's a vision for future growth. And also important to note is that the municipality is not bound by any of the recommendations identified in the master plan. There's a number of recommendations in the master plan. There's some capital cost estimates associated with the master plan, but these are always undertaken with additional knowledge, determining the actual need for it at a particular time, and also looking at the financial feasibility to actually pay for these improvements. A vision for the airport, and just then on the side here, is the vision for the Sioux Lookout Airport was identified as committed to supporting the economic and social needs of Sioux Lookout, the region, and the 29 remote First Nation communities served by the airport through the development and maintenance of appropriate airport facilities that ensure a safe, efficient, and environmentally responsible operation that meets the needs of the traveling public, the operators, and encourages economic development through the expansion of revenue and employment generating opportunities. So this sort of guides the vision of the master plan as we go forward with it. So this is the existing airport. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. A single runway defined as a code 3C or AGN 3A runway, instrument non-precision. And what the AGN 3A represents is a particular type of aircraft, and this is largely identified by aircraft such as the Dash 8. There's the single runway. It's, as I say, about 1,600 meters or 5,300 feet long. There's two primary taxiways that lead up to the apron one, which is the main apron, associated with the terminal building. There's also a second apron, apron 2, which accesses all of the commercial development area adjoining it. And beyond the airside commercial area, there's an area also in this, described in this area here, which is for non-airside commercial development. When we started doing the activity forecasts for the master plan, they were actually initially done pre-COVID. And then as COVID emerged, we realized that the forecasts as originally prepared were going to be unrealistic. And the problem is that this was such an unprecedented impact on the aviation industry. We really didn't know what was going to happen to the forecast. So looking at sort of industry kind of investigations and information is provided by both the airlines and a number of civil aviation authorities, the sense is that it's going to take probably 4 to 5 years for activity generally in the aviation world to get back to its pre-COVID levels. Sioux Lookout, because the nature of activity that takes place there, and there's a lot of medical related activity in terms of flights and travel to and from the remote communities, this kind of return to activity may happen sooner than some other airports that don't necessarily have that sort of commitment from travelers. Especially those airports that are dependent maybe on leisure travel, things like that may not recover as soon. So the top graph shows you in the blue what historic levels were at Sioux Lookout. So into 2018, 2019, they exceeded 150,000 annual passengers. And then in 2020, they dropped down to approximately 50,000 annual passengers. And in terms of the projection, we can see that over a period of about 4 to 5 years, we'll see the growth hopefully return, depending on the continued impacts of COVID. And then there's a natural growth that happens after that. And that growth is largely tied to increases in population in northwestern Ontario and some increase in demand for medical services that are provided through the community of Sioux Lookout. So that's generally how the forecast was generated. In terms of aircraft movements, we see that in 2020, there is just about 25,000 annual aircraft movements. We hopefully anticipate that within the next 4 to 5 years, they will climb to a point where they'll start to return to pre-COVID levels, which is somewhere below 40,000 movements. And then there's a kind of a optimistic profile and a less optimistic profile in terms of the growth of air carriers. The less optimistic assumes that there really isn't any growth in what we call general aviation, so non-commercial activities. So that includes things like flight charters, some medevac flights, and recreational flying, flight training, things like that. But there'll be some additional growth in terms of slight growth in air carrier movement. Some of the air carrier movement, some of the air carriers will be moving to larger aircraft for some of the more denser routes, switching out things like the metros to Dash 8s, things like that. The more optimistic growth suggests that there'll be, a general rise in general aviation activity, potentially due to economic development in the north, mining, ring of fire activity, things like that, as well as some additional air carrier increases as well, where frequency increases, not only just the size of aircraft increasing, but the frequency of flights increases as well. As part of the master plan process, we went through what we call a SWOT analysis, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and challenges. So some of the major strengths of the airport is that it's in relatively very good condition. You've just got a newly updated terminal building that's going to serve the needs of the airport throughout the horizon of the master plan. The airport's activity is largely derived from required travel that's associated with medical needs and other essential services. And because of that, is less impacted by economic trends. The airport is also served by a number of scheduled carriers, which provides a good, strong revenue base and some diversification. So, if there's financial troubles with one air carrier, it can often get picked up by another air carrier. So that's a very good strength as part of this airport. There's a number of airports that are only served by a single air carrier, and when they have financial difficulties or route changes, often that airport suffers significantly. The other big strength of this airport is the fact that it's solely owned by a single municipality. And this really provides a good, stable environment for the airport. And what we found, a lot of other studies that we've done for smaller airports, is when they are owned by a number of municipalities, there's often conflicts that in turn kind of diminish the opportunity of the airport to expand, grow, and develop. And the reason for that is different municipalities have different funding mechanisms to fund the airport, and some are in support of airport development, some aren't, and often it leads to procrastination on any movement forward. Weaknesses, the biggest weakness with this airport are just the physical terrain constraints posed by the by the terrain. The runways in a valley, aircraft have to climb up a hill to get to the apron in the terminal building. There's very little opportunity to expand the parking around the terminal building. These are big weaknesses. There's limited airside commercial development opportunities, and in speaking to Ben, there has been some demand for additional hangars, so there's limited opportunity in which to accommodate them. And the other potential weakness is a lack of a full parallel taxiway on the runway, and I'll discuss that a bit further. In terms of opportunities, there's a lot of infrastructure investment taking place in Northwestern Ontario, things like the all-season road, the Watay transmission project, potential ring of fire exploration and mining are all potential opportunities to this airport. And also in terms of medical services, just expanded medical and social services that are being provided through the community to the First Nations remote communities. Potential threats, they include competition from other regional airports in Northwestern Ontario that are vying for the same type of activity and for air services, especially in terms of cargo operations. The construction of the all-season road may decrease the demand for air service from certain communities. And again, there's always, this ongoing and potential future pandemic that could disrupt air travel in the future. And then the challenges moving forward is trying to expand the airport with the physical constraints that we have, maintaining operations during COVID, which has been a challenge for every airport, and then mitigating the impacts of the pandemic on airport operations, terminal operations. And then with all small airports that are municipally operated, capital funding is always a constraint to development. So this diagram shows some of the opportunities and constraints that we identified. They were based on site observations, looking at projected demand, talking to airport management, and talking to stakeholder input. And in terms of the stakeholders, we talked to the majority of the tenants located on the airport. We talked to representatives from the health communities. We talked to economic development people within the municipality. We talked to a couple of the larger businesses in the community to get their input with respect to future demand, things like that. So just to briefly go over some of the constraints we identified. One is this, the lack of what we call a parallel taxiway, which would run parallel to the runway. The reason that is a constraint is that aircraft that are, say, departing on runway 34 at this end, they have to do what we call backtrack, which means that the aircraft has to enter the runway, taxi along the runway, turn around, and then depart. And what that tends to do is it slows down the rate of occupancy, or slows down the flow of movement on and off the runway for arrivals and departures. So without that sort of parallel taxiway, we can potentially get delays in both departures and delays in arrivals. The other issue constraint that was identified by the air carriers was the lack of a bypass. So sometimes what occurs is that there's an aircraft that's coming down to depart, say on runway 34. There's an aircraft that's just landed, and it's landed maybe short of this taxiway or just beyond. So what happens is there's no ability for those two aircraft to meet on this taxiway and actually bypass one another. So that sometimes sets up constraints in terms of the flow of traffic, and then forces aircraft to again taxi all the way down to the end of the runway and use the other taxiway, which again it generally reduces the capacity of the runway. Another element that was discussed by the operators is the lack of approach lighting for either one of the runways. And this was especially identified by some of the medevac operators that indicated that, you know, to have a enhanced safety, safe operation, that they would benefit by having approach lighting that during really inclement weather and reduced visibility, it provides the flight crew with an additional layer of safety and being able to land at the airport. The other element that was described by or constraint by staff was the lack of a vehicle turnaround on the runway. And the constraint associated with this is that in the winter, when they're plowing runways and there's an aircraft approaching to land, the snowplow or sweeper needs to obviously remove itself from the runway. And currently right now, the only way they can do it is to enter one of the taxiways, you know, which in turn potentially blocks the aircraft from using that taxiway. So one of the things that we suggest is potentially a vehicle turnaround located about midfield, where a snowplow sweeper can turn off the runway and hold until the aircraft is departed or landed. The other constraints, there's obviously a constraint with Terminal 1. It's often at capacity with the number of aircraft that are parked on the apron, and there really is a need to try to expand that apron where possible in order to provide some additional parking stands for aircraft. Engine run-up area, that's number 6. Right now, there's no dedicated area in which the aircraft operators at the field have an aircraft that they can take and do an engine run-up. So that's something that we identified as well. On the de-icing, on the terminal apron itself, there is some de-icing that takes place on the apron, but at the moment there is no dedicated aircraft de-icing facility. So what happens is when an aircraft is de-iced, the de-icing fluid is just mixed in with the precipitation that's on the apron, and it just goes into the storm water system. To minimize the release of glycol into the environment, ideally what the airport needs is a dedicated de-icing facility that would have its own capture and containment methods, whereby de-icing fluid that is spent de-icing fluid that drops onto the apron is directed to a dedicated catch basin where it's directed then to potentially underground storage tank, and then it's removed by a vacuum vehicle or another vehicle that would take the glycol off site then for disposal. And in turn, what that would do would mitigate the migration of de-icing fluid into the environment. Line of sight is an issue already with the FSS. There are ways to improve that with the provisioning of CCTV cameras that would provide the FSS control tower with the ability to see the entire runway. Currently, right now, there is a segment of the runway that can't be seen visually from the control tower. Another constraint is vehicle parking. There just isn't sufficient parking at the top of the hill for passengers, meters and greeters, so forth. And so potentially there needs to be expansion of the parking, likely at a lower level. Another constraint we identified was the existing maintenance garage. The existing garage is really too small to accommodate the current range of heavy equipment that's needed to maintain the airport. And the other problem with the maintenance garage is that it doesn't have direct access to airside. So that means heavy equipment, things like snow plows, actually have to go on a portion of the landside road, which is also accessible by the public, go through a security fence in order to get on airside. So typically when we have maintenance facilities and we design them appropriately, we provide them with both direct airside and landside access. The other constraint that we need to work around is navigational aids. And right now there's a navigational aid located in this area here. And essentially what that does is it just prohibits any commercial development or otherwise any other development occurring in a certain radius around that facility. And then the final constraint that we identify is limited airside commercial access, really this area being really the only available area right now for any further commercial development on the airport. So from that opportunity and constraints and in discussion with stakeholders, including tenants and airport management, we went through a number of airport development concepts, and through discussions with Ben and his team and others, we eventually developed what we would consider a preferred airport development plan. So some of the features of this airport plan on airside include, you see where we have not necessarily a full parallel taxiway, but because of some of, again, the terrain constraints, what we've done is shown that there is a possibility to add a partial parallel taxiway in this area, which again limits the aircraft having to be on the runway for just a short period. It allows departing aircraft to hold, and there may be one or two aircraft that are holding, waiting for an inbound aircraft to land. So provides a much more safer environment and also enhances the viability of the runway and the processing capability of the runway as well, by limiting the delays caused by aircraft having to backtrack on the runway. In this concept, we've also added a couple of bypasses, one at this point, another one at this point, where aircraft can truly bypass one another on the taxiways. We've shown an expansion to the terminal apron, which would provide for some additional gating in this area. We've also shown for the location of a potential run-up area in this location as well. In terms of commercial development, what we've shown is a small extension to apron 2, a taxiway that would run in this direction. And what that does is then it allows this area to be developed for smaller hangars. So these would be hangars that would be demanded probably by pilot owners, people that own a single aircraft and operate it either for business or pleasure. But what it does is it starts to allow this area in here to be developed for larger commercial hangars. And in the future, as demand fills up this area, we've identified the potential for a secondary commercial, airside commercial development area down in this area, which, given the demand, could also expand even further into this area as well. In terms of airport support facilities, we show a relocated airport maintenance garage down in this location. And it would have both airside and landside access. One of the other benefits of this location is that it is likely within the 20-year horizon of this master plan that the airport is going to exceed 180,000 passengers a year. And when that happens, the airport is going to be obligated to have a fire rescue facility on the airport for emergency responses. And a requirement of having, say, a fire department on the airport is that it needs to meet response times onto the runway. And so this location, which is sort of midfield, adjacent to a taxiway, provides excellent response times to the runway should that fire facility or emergency response facility be required, which I think at some point within the 20 years, likely I would think within maybe 10 to 12 years, it's likely going to be a requirement of Transport Canada for the airport to have such a facility. In terms of terminal parking, we've shown a potential expansion to the lower lot in this area here, which is probably given the train constraints, the only likely feasible opportunity to provide some additional parking for the terminal building. We've also identified, along with this, some potential expansion of what we would consider non-aviation commercial development. And again, depending on the demand of aviation versus non-aviation, that could be developed in a number of different manners. So this is the airport land use plan that coincides with the development plan. So the areas in yellow are commercial, aviation-related commercial development. So we see that development there. We see that here, and potentially it could expand into this area as well. The large blue tract of land is land that would be reserved for non-aviation related commercial development, or at least aviation commercial development that doesn't require airside access. This sort of light blue area is the area that we reserve for airside. So this is a protected area to ensure the safety of the runway, taxiways, so forth. We show this area in sort of orange, I guess, is for airport support functions. So we have some, again, some navigational aids located here. We think that the existing airport maintenance garage should probably be retained. You can use it to store equipment that's not required because of the season. So it's a good place to just have dry storage. And then we've identified a new airport support area down in this area, which would accommodate the a new apron maintenance garage, airport maintenance garage, and potential fire hall as well. And then in terms of phasing, so we looked at short, medium, and long term. Short term is generally 1 to 5 years. Medium term is 6 to 10. And then long term is 11 and beyond. So in the short term, some of the immediate needs that we see are expansion of Apron 1, the development of this short taxiway to allow for this commercial development to take place, the provision of at least one bypass located in this area, and also the provision of a new apron maintenance garage located here. In the longer term, beyond 5 years, expansion to the terminal parking lot, the potential for the second bypass in this area. And in the sort of medium term, the development of a holding bay at the end of the runway here. So what that would allow is aircraft to, even though they still have to backtrack, allows an aircraft to go into this area and hold for an arrival aircraft and then pull back out and depart. So it's kind of how the phasing is identified over the period of the short and medium term. And then in the long term, we see the development of this extended taxiway. And, you know, there is the potential maybe to cut through here, but that's going to have a fairly significant cost because of the train constraints in this area. And also in the long term, although, you know, that might be medium term, is the development of this taxiway and the associated road system in order to allow for commercial development over the long term. So as part of the phasing plan, we also identified some very high level capital costs associated with some of these infrastructure improvements. And in identifying this, I just want to kind of reiterate that, you know, the master plan is really a guiding document. The municipality is not bound to implement any of these recommendations, and the implementation and phasing of these recommendations always need to be assessed with respect to, you know, a number of criteria, including the operational necessity, financial capability, and the cost benefit analysis. So just to identify some of the capital costs, Apron 1 expansion, about 3.5 million. That taxiway that was to allow for that further hangar development, about just under 700,000. The run-up area, 1.6. Apron 2 extension, or pardon me, the first one was the bypass. Apron 2 extension, about 800,000. The turn button that was at the end of runway 34 is about 2 million, and the combined services building about 6 million. And then in the medium term, oops, sorry, I can go back. The taxiway Bravo runway bypass about 1.4 million, and then parking lot expansion about 700,000. So that's it for my presentation. I certainly welcome any comments, questions from your worship and councillors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valentine. Very interesting. I'll go around the table for council comments and questions. Start with Councillor Timpson.
Well, yeah, thanks, Greg. That was very interesting, and it was very straightforwardly laid out. I understood it, so that's that's a good sign.
That's good.
I'm wondering, the expansion of the airport and the expansion of the number of persons using it is based on a couple of assumptions. And number one is that the population in the north will continue at the rate it is at now. That the health needs will continue to be as serious as they are, and that there is no all-weather road. I'm wondering if there's been some thought in terms of, as the North develops and as all societies have developed economically, population rates have dropped. There's increased in health care going into the communities. Will that reduce the rate for bringing people out? And there will be an all-weather road at some point, which may reduce the leisure travel. And with all this and the funding cuts that we're probably going to see in after the pandemic, are these basic assumptions considered in the planning? And add to that the whole issue of climate change and the what that will mean, and what the measures to reduce climate change will mean. Will it mean fossil fuel prices will skyrocket, or we won't be able to get as much, or there will have to be reductions in flights?
Yeah.
Are these, where is the airline industry with these bigger global issues?
Yeah.
And where are we here in Sioux Lookout, where we are assuming that the people from the north are going to continue to come down so frequently?
Yeah.
They may be doing a lot of it virtually as well. So,
Yeah.
packed a lot in that.
Yeah. No, and through your worship, when we did the forecasting, we looked at a number of forecasting models, and we, in a sense, tested a number of assumptions in terms of what the potential activity might be at the airport in terms of passenger movements. And what we found was that the best correlation that we could come up with was provincial forecasts for population growth in Northwestern Ontario. So that's kind of what we used to base a lot of the forecasts on. I think you're right in terms of, there's probably going to be more virtual medicine. We've certainly seen it through COVID, and that is likely going to expand. But you're also dealing with things like an aging population that will, maybe need more treatment in terms of cancer care or other types of care. So it's kind of a balance of one or the other. With respect to climate change, I guess one of the concerns I have is that, a number of the remote communities will still be ice roads in the future. And what we've seen, in Northern Ontario and elsewhere is that we're now getting a limited season for the ice roads. So, we suspect, and other industry experts agree, is that there could be actually an increased demand for air service into remote communities, because there's just going to be less dependability on the ice roads. So a lot of these factors were taken into consideration, and really a forecast is really a best guess. If 20 years from now, if we hit the mark in terms of the number of annual passengers and number of aircraft movements going through this airport, I would be a really happy man if if we were dead on the forecast. The likelihood is that, there's going to be events, there's going to be things that are unpredictable, such as COVID. I mean, who, 4 years ago could ever predict that COVID was going to totally decimate the aviation and the airline industry in the world? Nobody could predict that. So it's, as I say, I guess forecast is really just is a best guess based on the assumptions that we have on hand at the moment.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timpson. Councillor Lego.
Yeah, I kind of think that a cautious approach for the foreseeable future is needed to see where the numbers are actually going to be. We're sitting pretty low with numbers. It's been described before, 70% decrease. I don't know what's happening now, if we're seeing a bit more traffic with people getting vaccinated. I do like the idea of building up the development of off of the second apron number 2 to generate some more revenue for the airport. The turnaround button on 34 is probably needed as well, and increasing the apron, extra couple spaces on the apron. Again, it's going to be, I caution to take it slow. We need to see what the world's going to look like coming out of this pandemic. So
absolutely,
we need to just sort of watch and see, and hopefully our reserves don't get hit too badly, and then we can continue forward and expand as needed, and then using this to see what we need for the future, and if we're going to hit the 180,000 mark, and then what that'll bring, and hopefully there'll be some funding at that time.
Yeah, and through your worship, one of the benefits of ACAP is that you can get that funded through ACAP, both the shelter and the firefighting vehicle.
That is all for me. Thanks for the presentation. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lego. Councillor Bath.
Yeah, it's thanks, Greg. That's pretty interesting. I'm always interested in what's happening at the airport, of course. The one curious thing I'm curious about is the taxiway, parallel taxiway idea. So would we consider making that a parallel runway rather than a parallel taxiway? I understand there's certainly going to be a different level of construction doing that, but at least then you have a separate runway if in the case of something happening to the primary runway, or when you're doing work on the primary runway. I'm just curious if that's something that would ever be considered, or you had considered, or is that just way
unfortunately, you probably couldn't turn it into a runway, partly because of the obstructions that are in place with that taxiway. So it's unlikely that it could be considered as a runway in the future. Yeah.
Okay, that's really all I had. I just was curious about that. It seems if you're going to go to all the work to build the taxiway, it might be worth going one step further. And I guess the other thought I have is that, since we've been involved, we started out with very small airplanes on our airport. We've moved up now to the dashes, and I'm sure in the future there's going to be something similar that's in the market coming in there that will carry more people on shorter runways and things like that. I don't know if that's something that you've thought about at all.
Well, we look at the current and future aircraft mix, and the likelihood is that the design aircraft going into the future is going to be the Dash 8, say the Dash 8 300, or the Q400, the Dash 8 400. The runway as it stands right now is what they call AGN 3A, which is really kind of limited to sort of larger turboprop aircraft. It's not to say that you'll see an occasional jet potentially operate from the airport, But in order for this airport to be sort of upgraded to an AGN 3B, there would likely have to be an expansion to the runway in its length and some other modifications as well. But in terms of the nature of the traffic, talking to the airlines, I don't see the need to develop this airport further than what its current status is as an AGN 3A. Now, 10 years from now, that may change. And, typically when we do airport master plans, we usually do an update of a master plan every 10 years because, things do change, technologies change. And, the master plan we consider a sort of a dynamic document that always needs to be kept in check with the reality of the industry and the airport's operation.
Yeah, that's all for me. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Councillor Bath. Councillor Fenelon.
Yes, good, very good presentation and lots to be learned on this. One question I guess I have is for the air traffic controller base.
Yes.
Can that go up in the air more? Or does it?
No, it's it's height restricted. I can't tell you for sure if it could go up higher or not. One of the thoughts that we had actually was if it is required in the future to potentially relocate it to another site where it would have more prominent views of the runway and the taxiway system. The reality is that it's not a true control tower. It's what they call a flight service station. And flight service stations, although they want to have a visual of the aircraft maneuvering areas, it's not an absolute requirement. And they can do the same with camera systems. In fact, we're looking at one airport right now where we may replace the existing manned control tower of the FSS with just a pole with a number of CCTV cameras located on it. And the FSS crew could be located in downtown or in their home for that matter.
Okay, no, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fenelon. Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg. That was a good presentation. It's a great report. I don't have anything further. You touched on my only question about the time frame and the renewal of the master plan every 10 years, which is good. Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I think we have some very good options laid out for depending on how our airport bounces back post COVID. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cassidy. I'll have a couple of questions here. Some of them seem going to be micro. In one of your slides, you talked about the population we serve is 40,000, which is a jump of 10,000. Typically, we use the number of 30,000. I'm not sure where the 40,000 came from.
Yeah, I got it through some documentations. I guess I added up the population of the Sioux Lookout community, and then I got some statistics on some of the populations of remote communities. So I might be off. I'll go back and check that.
Typically, we've been using 30,000 as an approximation for Sioux Lookout in the 29 communities to the north. If you include some to the south, you could bump it up a bit, but and it depends. Sometimes the populations for the First Nations are given as a total population, which might include off reserve as well as on reserve. So
I see. I guess I can't throw Thunder Bay in there as a remote community.
Another one was the median age in the report. I can't remember page 16 or 17. Our median age in Sioux Lookout was quoted as 47. Our median age is actually 37.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably a misspelling because I recollect that it is 37. You're right.
Another small one. and this is maybe for Ben, Bigwood Lake, I saw it identified, I thought as Little Lake on one of the, did I, or is Little Lake another lake? I'll leave that with you, Ben, on one of the
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lawrence, that's come up in the past as well. Even when we way back when the municipality was looking at purchasing some land around that lake. It's an elusive name.
Okay.
Because back with the planning department a number of years ago, we did look at it, and yeah, Little Lake came up, but Bigwood seems to be the local accepted name of the lake, I guess. But officially, I don't know, maybe Councillor Cassidy can help us in his contacts through the MNRF, maybe to really get find out the true name of that. But absolutely, it's out there.
Well, I'll take that to the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. That one's up for renaming, then maybe we'll go back to the original Indigenous name. On one of your slides, you showed the projections, which included historical. And in 2017, I think it was, the passenger movements jumped from 125,000, a big jump to 150,000. We know why they went down in 2020. Why did they go up 25,000, which was an increase of 20% or so in 2017?
Probably Ben is the best one to answer that. I think part of that was due to the provision of additional healthcare services that was being offered through the health center. And it may also have been due to maybe some new entrants operating out of the airport. Ben, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Mayor Lawrence. The jump in 2018, as Greg was alluding to, that was the onset of the, 2010 there was a jump, but 2018 was the biggest jump based on the full-blown hospital capacities. But then what came up, and I believe it may have gone to council as an informational email perhaps. Well, we came across, just recently, we came across some reporting discrepancies with the passenger movement. So we went back to 2017 and realized that there were some discrepancies there. And then that did make a change in 2017, carried on through 18, 19, and then we started getting the truer numbers from that time. So the reporting system, there was an issue with reporting. So that's under control now. And then just as an aside to that, we this year was the first year that we actually were able to compare our our in-house collected numbers with Transport Canada numbers, because it was the first year since I've been at the airport that we can actually go to Transport Canada and see passenger numbers for Sioux, at least for 2020 or 2019. 2020 was unavailable to date, but hey, we made it.
Thanks, Ben. On slide 8, there was an area, the blue tract of land that was identified for future development. Is not a good part of that currently the Outland Ballard Camp developed site? Am I wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's already developed, and then when they leave, we'll have a.
Yeah, I think we've identified it on the drawing as being this area here, which is the approximate area for it. Yeah.
So that blue tract is considerably larger than that's a significant site that they have, but this is quite a large tract.
Yeah. And the reality is, especially if there's some commercial development that takes place eventually across the highway, the reality is we don't know how desirable that is really going to be for non-aviation related commercial development.
Very good. I just comment on sort of, I agree we need to proceed cautiously. It's great to have a plan. And I think airport manager on our last 10-year plan, it took us perhaps 18 or 15 years, I can't remember, to fully implement it, but we did by the time we were finished, 15, 18 years, we had completed all the strokes of the previous master plan. So I look at this in sort of the same light that eventually this will get done, short term, midterm, long term. I'm more optimistic. I think in terms of continued, not how quickly it bounces back. I think there will, as you said, Greg, I think we have the potential to bounce back faster than some other regional airports. But in the long term, even if winter roads develop, the average distance to some of these communities, the average distance is going to be 500 kilometers over gravel roads. It's going to be an 8 to 10 hour trip if you've got a reliable vehicle. Just because there's a road gone into the community doesn't mean to say all of a sudden, bang, everybody's using it. I think air travel will continue for decades in a big way here, because not everybody owns a vehicle, not everybody wants to get in, and they might do it once a year or twice a year, but on regular medical trips, etc., I think the flights will continue. I think there already is telehealth. Will there be some more? I think that will develop more, but I think there's still going to be the need for in-person medical the way we're doing it. And the other side is I think goods and services will continue to flow to the north, and cargo and whatever, and the Sioux Airport will figure large in that. So, and if other developments in the north, I think will bring more healthcare. In fact, whether it be education here, education and training, I think is beginning to form a significant part of our air travel, and that will only grow. As for the population, I think the population is growing. Right now, the lifespans in the north have been shorter, but with improving healthcare, lifespans are increasing, and that's overlapping with continued population growth at the younger end. So I think the population in the north will grow and be at your 40,000 number in not too many years into the future. So I'm more optimistic, but I think caution is the word to use. Airport manager, do you have anything you want to close out with?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, no, just thank you, Greg, very much for all the work that went into this. And yeah, what an unfortunate time to have to go through that with the pandemic and everything else. But yeah, just very much appreciated, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. I will make those minor edits to the final plan, and I'll get a renewed copy to Ben.
Excellent report, Greg, and thanks for the presentation here. I think you've got council's interest, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Clerk, do we need a motion to receive this report?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes, we do. I've prepared the motion for council's consideration.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That council receives and approves the airport master plan as presented at the April 28th, 2021 special council meeting.
I need a mover for that. Councillor Fanlon, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any final discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Greg.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Council. Thank you, Airport Manager. And we will now move to item 5.2, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Are the presenters with us? Yes, I see Nick Chauvin and Donna. Very good.
Yeah.
So, Clerk, do you want to introduce this one?
Sure, if you like. So through you, Mayor Lawrence, first of all, a big welcome to Nick, Donna, and Susan, the amazing team that we've had the pleasure of working with over the last year on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, along with a very helpful and informing committee that also provided input on the plan. These three individuals have a great deal of expertise in a variety of areas, and we were fortunate to be working with them to produce this important community document. So I will stop talking and I will turn things over to Nick, and they'll begin their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian, for the introduction. I'm just going to pull up my slides. If everyone can see that now. Yeah, so hello and thank you very much for having our team join you today to present the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. It's been a pleasure working on this with Michelle and Brian, a large group of leaders from your community through the advisory committee that guided this work. Just because I wouldn't want to assume that you're all familiar with who we are, I'll just take a quick moment to let my team introduce ourselves. It's my understanding that we have about 10 minutes. We'll try our best to keep to that time for our presentation before moving on to any questions about the plan. So I myself, I'm Nick Chauvin. I'm a consultant from LVCG Consulting for Impact. And this work was done through a joint partnership between LVCG and Sioux Strategies, where I led the project, but along with invaluable contributions of my colleagues, Donna and Susan, to develop the plan. So I'm currently joining from Toronto tonight. I was disappointed that the circumstances this year did not allow for me to actually physically get up to Sioux Lookout. As I've really enjoyed making the trip up to Sioux Lookout in the past through some other work I've done with Minnow Yawin and Slifna over the years. So Donna, would you like to just introduce yourself next?
Yes, for sure. Bonjour, everybody. Mayor, Council, and your wonderful support staff that we had the pleasure of working with. My name is Donna Williams. I am here in Red Lake, Ontario, in Lac Seul territory. I am a Lac Seul community member on my mother's side and First Nations from Curve Lake, where I was raised on my father's side. So I've been up here working in health field for 30 years. So Nick and I have worked together on some work with seniors care, housing. So it's been quite a pleasure to be involved in this project. So miigwech for this opportunity.
Thanks, Donna. And Susan?
Hi, my name is Susan McGregor. I am actually a full-time professor at Humber College here in Toronto. And my expertise and my work prior to teaching is in community development, community well-being plans, disaster and emergency management plans. So that's sort of the lens that I brought to this plan. And yeah, to echo both Donna and Nick, it's been wonderful working with the community of Sioux Lookout, and I really wish I got a chance to go there, but there's still time in the future, especially now that you're going to have a fancy new airport. So.
Thanks so much, John and Susan. So Donna's going to talk first about just a couple items, the overview of the plan, the provincial framework, and some of the guiding principles within the plan.
Yeah, for sure. So just to highlight what's included in the plan. So, you know, I know we have a limited time, but so we're going to touch on some of the highlights. So we do have an executive summary that includes, I guess, our summary of our findings, as well as a welcome from Michelle, the CAO, and your mayor, Doug Lawrence. We've got some demographical information on the community. We did some research and homework there to position the community, things like the health status, education, employment, crime levels. We also cover the provincial framework that we were asked to use as part of the guide for this work, and as well as our extensive engagement that was done, and Nick's going to speak to that and some of those findings. Susan was really valuable in helping us identify performance measurements and identify goals and objectives. So we'll cover a little bit of that as well. The ministry framework was really in response to in looking at incident responses, what we needed to do around intervention, prevention, and social development. That's all I'm going to say about that one. But I did want to spend a minute on our guiding principles and explain a little bit about our views and what was guiding this project. So when we talk about anti-racism, we were looking at how to create understanding or how to incorporate the historical and some of the systemic racism issues within the community. There was a lot of awareness around this with our advisory group, as well as survey results, which we had a high return rate. Over 90% of respondents felt that there were racist issues that needed to be dealt with, and that awareness was a huge step forward in creating a safety well-being plan. So that was a really big step forward, in our opinion, around this. The other area we look at is around equity lens. So what that means is we're looking at outcomes, and we're looking at not necessarily the same strategies and approaches for everyone. So what do we need? You know, a marginalized or poverty or someone facing poverty is going to need more resources for housing. Although, as we'll get into it, we'll see that that's an issue across all sectors. Social determinants of health was also important, especially around poverty, education, housing. But also what was really important was the collective impact. So working with the advisory committee on their shared vision, their common understanding, that we agreed on how to measure and what we were measuring and how this was important to the community, and agreement on our approaches and activities, and also the ongoing communications. So as this project moved ahead, keeping, making sure that we brought those findings back to the group. So with that, that's kind of the picture, but I'm sure you want to know what we, some of our findings. So I'll hand that back over, I believe, to Nick.
Yeah, thanks so much, Donna. So our project activities largely occurred between the months of June to February. And we largely started with having individual consultations with all of the members of the advisory committee, which, being 24 members strong, covered a lot of agencies and key stakeholders across Sioux Lookout. So it was a really good, wide initial polling of some of the stakeholders to speak to the experiences and the services within the community. So all of the organizations who represented in the advisory committee are listed up front in the plan for your reference, but just to give you a taste of some of those that were reflected, it included local healthcare agencies, mental health and addiction services, child services, police services, local businesses, the faith community, local educational groups, community services, and many more. So it was a quite diverse group that brought a lot of perspectives and expertise to the plan. We did succeed in arranging 2 focus groups with individuals from within the community, talking directly in conversation with individuals. However, when we pursued many more than just those 2, but we did find difficulty in ultimately executing those focus groups, as unfortunately our community partners that we relied heavily on to either physically host these sessions or to convene the members were facing their own challenges with and competing priorities, since this was happening during the second wave of COVID. What did significantly help us was the large success we had with the online community safety and wellbeing survey. We saw over 500 interactions with the survey, and within that, over 300 complete submissions from unique individuals. So given that response rate and the population in Sioux Lookout, it was a very strong sample size, and the results of the survey were very informative, similar to the example that Donna gave earlier. So in addition to the individual consultations with the advisory committee members, we had 2 half-day working group sessions with the committee throughout the project to directly address findings that we curated and shared back with them, and to develop first the strategic priority areas of focus for the plan, and then during the second later session, the goals and goal outcomes and activities for the plan as well. In addition to those, earlier this month, there was also a presentation and discussion with the advisory committee for the plan's draft. So within the plan, there are 6 priority areas of focus listed there on the slide. And within each of these areas of focus, there are 2 to 4 goal outcomes with a total of 18 goal outcomes within the plan. So this does scope out a lot of potential activities for us to look out to pursue within the plan. And this is something that we actively discussed with the advisory committee throughout the process. However, there was the agreement that it was necessary to include all 6 of them rather than to make some hard decisions and omit perhaps 1 or 2 of them where these would be excluding community needs that had been identified. And another really important part of this decision to settle on all 6 of these was that many of these areas are very interrelated. So in order to be successful in any of them, it requires progress across all of them, that the omission could ultimately jeopardize the success of the others included. So those are the strategic priorities within the plans. But now Susan, I'm going to pass it over to her to speak to the performance management framework and some considerations for the implementation of the plan.
Thanks, Nick. In accordance with what the provincial government actually asked for in this plan, we did create a performance measurement framework. If you're not familiar with a performance measurement framework, it's basically a system that you develop in advance to ensure that you know when you've achieved success and how much success you've achieved. So it takes sort of the guesswork out of plans. You don't just make a plan and then say, all right, we're done. You can actually measure. Yes, we've achieved it, and here's how we can prove that we've achieved it. So, being able to actually show success and a percentage measure of success is particularly useful in these plans, really just for your own community to know that you're successful, but also for potential for future funding proposals where you can actually say, here's our plan, we've achieved success in steps 1, 2, and 3. We need your help to achieve further success in steps 4, 5, and 6. So that's really why it's useful to you. So you're moving the slides. I'm trying to move the slides on my own screen as well. Sorry, because sorry about that. So what the performance framework looks like, and you can see it in the full document, is a whole bunch more detail than this slide. Basically, we've taken the goals that we have put together, and then we've shown what an indicator would be that would show that that goal is successful. So similar to an indicator in your vehicle, you flick your indicator on saying that you're going to turn right, you're showing that you're going to do that. So that's exactly what an indicator would be. And then we've also listed the data sources that would support the success of your actual outcome. Now, some of the data sources live within the municipality, but many of the data sources are data that's already being gathered in the community, either by members of the advisory committee or by other departments. Some of the data sources may lie in Statistics Canada or potentially in the Ministry of Health. So this is not data that you have to go out and gather and spend more money. Much of the data already exists. You just have to mine it. And then, of course, the last column would be frequency. So how often you would do these things, typically once a year, though you could do it more often if you wanted to. So we've just listed on this slide the number of indicators there are for each of the strategic priorities. I'm not going to go through and read you the numbers. You guys can all do that. So I'll just go to the last slide, Nick. So the actual implementation, sorry, my eyes are really old. That's why I have it open on a bigger screen on my other screen as well, because this is too small for me to read. So the actual plan implementation eventually needs to be defined by the municipality, so you guys, but this is a really good start to give you guys a plan to work from. As we've already mentioned, the inputs and outputs should be affirmed by the community stakeholders, and I think that this plan's already gone a long way to do that with our stakeholders, with the advisory committee, and through the survey that's been done. And of course, we're looking for community buy-in, coordination, and collaboration, because all of that will make the plan significantly more successful. of course, like all plans, what would make any plan more successful is some resource commitments by government, and hopefully a well thought out, put together plan will assist Sioux Lookout in being able to achieve some grants from various other levels of government. So I think that concludes the bulk of our presentation, but we are quite happy to answer any questions or field any comments.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan. So that does conclude our presentation. We did try and keep it high level and move through it, relying on that you had the plan in full in advance, and that might simulate some more detailed things. But with that, I pass it over back to the council to ask any questions that you have.
Thanks very much, Nick, Donna, and Susan. We'll go to council for questions and comments. Councillor Cassidy.
No, I went through it. It's a pretty good plan. It looks like we're taking in a lot of the feedback we got from the people in the survey, which is I think where this needs to go. I have no questions or comments. I'm looking forward to seeing this in action, and hopefully this can help people to Sioux Lookout. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fenelon.
Yes, I read through to the end there today, and one thing that jumped out to me in the end is that the amount of people that have to be involved in running this and getting it through to acceptance. And it seems to me there's quite a few people that are in there. If I'm wrong, tell me. I don't know. Oh.
Comment on it.
Susan, were you commenting, or sorry?
Your worship, I can comment on that.
Oh, CAO, thank you. I wasn't sure who. So thank you.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence. For the community safety and well-being plan, it's legislated what types of representation you have to have on the advisory committee. Because Sioux Lookout is the hub of the North, and we're predominantly here as a service community to a lot of our First Nations communities north of us, including our own community. We felt it important to include more than just what was required, the minimal amount of agencies required to be on the advisory committee. So we expanded it to include a lot of other agencies to make sure that there was a broad representation on the advisory committee. So that's why the group is fairly large. That was by choice through administration to make sure that we included all agencies that provide health, social services, education, and justice as well to our northern communities, because while residents are here in our community, they're part of our community as well.
Thank you. You good, Councillor Fallon, with that? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Fallon, you joined us, then you went mute again. There you go. I'm sorry, Councillor Fallon, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, thanks, folks. Yeah, I noted that like a good number of the initiatives that were identified are actually, we are actually working fairly hard to accomplish. Housing, a lot of initiatives in housing, addiction services, and so on. And I think it's going to be a useful plan to use as fodder, I guess, for when we are trying to get government to approve the funds for these things. You know, they're all very expensive initiatives, and we are reliant on the government, whatever their flavor of the week is, if we get the money, you know. So I think it'll be a useful document from that. There was one part there, I think it was this one. I thought I wrote it down. It said that oh no, I got it. It's all right. Forget it. I figured that one out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bath.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's kind of reminiscent of a plan. It's something I never think I can understand when these type of plans come out, but I work at it a little bit. A few years ago, I was pretty active in the Healthy Community Task Force, which was very much a similar plan. And I look at a lot of the initiatives in here, and that was part also in that plan. And I think that plan worked well for a few years. It moved ahead, and it sort of petered out. And I think now it's just sort of petered out. And I'm concerned that with these plans, it's very hard to keep the initiatives on the table. So I don't know. I'm certainly not the person to understand how to do that, but I think that's certainly what's going to be important if we're going to have a success with it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Beth. And I see the clerk here has his hand up. Yep. Is that or the CAO as well?
I'll defer to the CAO.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to defer to, I think we're both going to say the same thing, so go ahead.
To you, Mayor Lawrence. Thank you, Councillor Bath. Yes, I think one of the key differences between the Healthy Community Task Force and its strategy and our strategy, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, is that this task force strategy was sort of, left to a group of incredibly community-minded, well-intentioned, people who work towards the strategy and implementing the strategy sort of from the side of their desk as another sort of project of their primary jobs. And I think that probably contributed to the slowing of momentum over the years. The difference here is that the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan is a plan that the municipality owns, for lack of a better word, even though we can't implement it on our own, and we will require the support and engagement of a number of, a large number of community stakeholders. There will be annual reporting on this plan to council and updates and reviewing the metrics and indicators. So we will be able to keep this at the forefront of council's mind in the coming years.
Thank you, CAO. Does that answer your question?
The clerk summarized it well.
Clerk, thank you. Councillor Bath, you good with that?
Yeah, I did. I don't disagree with that. I understand exactly what Clerk Ryan said. I understand it was the Healthy Community Task Force was placed on the desk of people who already had a job, and including him, and they worked hard at it. And I think if we can keep it on council's table more as a community plan, I think it'll certainly be more successful, more chance of being successful.
Thanks, Councillor Beth. And I'll go to Councillor Lego, who actually sat on the committee, and we'll see what he has to say.
Somewhat sat on the committee. Sometimes work life gets in the way of sitting on a committee and taking part in them. So I apologize for that, but I did thoroughly enjoy the presentation and reading the document. I think some change has already taken place. Sioux Lookout is very progressive in that way. And I see that, well, change, it's going to be a multi-generational thing. It's been multi-generations for it to get to where it is today. So change and positive change is coming. I see that in our community. It's a great community. I like the fact that there was multiple agencies and groups involved in this. I think pressure needs to come from all of these groups to the other levels of government to get funding for what's needed in our community. And I just want to thank you all for putting this out and being involved. It's an important thing that we need for our community and moving forward. And I guess the next thing would be, what are the next steps to look forward to in the future? Thanks,
Councillor Lego. Nobody's putting up their hand quickly to answer that question, so I'll go with my comments, and then because I have a similar question as well. But yeah, thanks very much. Great report. In some ways, I feel like we have been doing many of the things that are in here in different ways. In part, the Healthy Community Task Force, but in part through our advocacy. I think bringing so many agencies together was important, but that's what I see happening in Sioux Lookout more and more all the time over the years that we're working together as agencies and partners, and recognizing that our goals can be best achieved working together. Absolutely. I was on a call today with the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority, the All Chiefs meeting, and certainly that's what that was about. And the recognition, I mean, that I'm on the call and the call, the meeting, call it a call, it's a video conference. But I see that more and more, and I see that so important for us to achieve some of the outcomes we want. And as Councillor Lego says, some of this is multi-generational, but progress must be made. This report, we were already doing and asking the province for some of the things that we need. Some of them need to be homegrown for sure, but we were doing that. But, and we're not getting most of them. We have some successes, but guaranteed if we hadn't done this report, we wouldn't get anything until we did the report. So it was absolutely necessary to do the report, and it was another way to bring agencies together to work together. So good. So my question, I'll take Councillor Legos and say, and I'm wondering, I know we can have a meeting scheduled on May 15th to look at plans we've already. Was this one of the plans we're going to look at and see what the next steps might be? Yeah, it is. Perfect.
Yes.
Good. So we're already moving. In about 2.5 weeks, we'll be including that in an all-day Saturday session to work on various things. Well, Nick, Donna, and Susan, on behalf of council, and I'd also like you to use this as a forum to thank everybody out there in the public on committees who participated on the committee, who completed the survey, who engaged in some way. Even though it was COVID, done during COVID, people can't say they weren't given the opportunity to have input. I think that was provided. So before we say CIO, I think you have something.
Yes, just if I may, in closing, I just, on behalf of municipal staff, in particular, Brian and I, my co-chair, co-lead on this project for the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. We'd like to thank you, Nick, Susan, and Donna for all of your assistance in getting the plan together, and your perseverance with the large number of people that were on the advisory committee. I know it wasn't easy reaching out to all the stakeholder groups, especially through the times of COVID. So you've done an excellent job, and we truly appreciate that concerted effort to do that and make sure that you made all those contacts. I know that it delayed it somewhat, but we're happy that the plan came out the way it did, and especially with the response to the community survey, that was phenomenal. You don't see that kind of response in normal circumstances, even not in COVID times. So it was greatly appreciated. So thank you very much.
All right. Anything final to say, Nick?
No, other than just thank you very much. We really appreciate your kind words and your validation. And we, as we said at the beginning, we share that right back to municipality staff, to the advisory committee, but also just for the residents of Sioux Lookout for participating, for being active and sharing their opinions and entrusting us with this, because it is important, and it obviously some initiatives would be done in the absence of this plan, but it's important to be able to capture it at times like this as well. And so we really appreciate the opportunity to be brought in and do this, and thank you.
Thank you. And Donna and Susan?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Nick has said. Thanks so much. It's been an incredible opportunity. The people of Sioux Lookout are incredibly community minded and very, very dedicated to the success of their community, which is lovely, lovely to see. And as I said, I can't wait to get out there and visit.
Thank you. Donna?
Yes, just miigwech for having me be part of this and getting to know your community even more. And hope that I can start coming there a little bit more often again. So see everybody, and steal some of your ideas for Red Lake. I'll tell Mark.
We work within our own boundaries.
Tell Mark we'll send him the bill too.
Oh yeah, you can do that. Okay, have a great evening.
Thanks, Donna. Just before we leave it, on
you.
behalf of council, I'd like to say thank you to the CIO and the clerk. I know you put a lot of effort into this, so thank you both. And clerk, one final piece here, or a motion to receive this report.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes, I have prepared a motion for council's consideration. It reads as follows. That council receives and approves the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan as presented at the April 28th, 2021 Special Council meeting.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any final discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Okay,
And
good night.
good night. Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
evening.
Bylaws. Bylaw number 42-21, being a bylaw to authorize and direct the CAO. Nope. Yes, we do need this one. To execute a transfer payment agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Silicote and the Ontario Trillium Foundation for COVID-19 recovery for the Silicote Public Library. That bylaw number 42-21 be read a first, second, and third time and passed. Moved by Councillor Fanlon, seconded by Councillor Timpson. All in favor? Carried. And confirmatory bylaw number 41-21 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Silicote, April 28th, 2021 Special Council meeting. Be read first, second, and third time and passed. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Fanlon. All in favor? Carried. And as you know, we are now adjourned.
Okay, have a good night,
Night,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Night.